Imagine standing in a space no larger than a standard bathroom stall. The air is thick with the scent of industrial disinfectant, cold sweat, and the underlying metallic tang of old radiator pipes. There is no ring here. There are no padded floors, no bright lights, and no referee to step in when things get ugly. You are surrounded by 4 walls of gray concrete and a steel door that only opens when someone else decides it's time. In this claustrophobic world, violence isn't a sport. It is a sudden, jarring weather pattern that can break over you at any second. If you find yourself in the middle of a confrontation in a space this tight, your fancy footwork is useless. Your long-range kicks are non-existent. You have only your upper body, your elbows, and your ability to turn yourself into a human fortress. This is the crucible that birthed one of the most mysterious and debated combat systems in the world, 52 blocks, often whispered about under the name Jailhouse Rock. For decades, this style existed only in the shadows of the American penal system, passed down through whispers and clandestine training sessions behind the gym or in the shadow of the bleachers. It was a secret language of survival spoken in the most dangerous zip codes in the country. To the uninitiated, it looks like a frantic, rhythmic dance of the arms, a chaotic blur of elbows and palms. But to those who know, it is a sophisticated system of kinetic geometry designed for one purpose: to ensure that the man who strikes first doesn't get to strike twice. Is it a legitimate martial art with roots reaching back to the ancestral warrior traditions of Africa, or is it a gritty, improvised evolution of American boxing, distorted and hardened by the unique pressures of prison life? For years, martial arts historians and street legends have clashed over its origins, its effectiveness, and its very existence. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the invisible art of the yard. We are diving deep into the mechanics of a style that turns the human skeleton into a weapon of pure defense, exploring the urban myths, the bloody reality of the New York prison circuit, and the technical brilliance of a system that was never meant to be seen by the outside world. This is the story of 52 blocks. To understand 52 blocks, you first have to understand the environment of the mid-20th century American prison system, particularly in the Northeast. We are looking at institutions like Rikers Island, Comstock, and Attica during the 60s and 70s. These were not just places of confinement, they were high-pressure cookers of social and physical tension. In these environments, traditional boxing, the sweet science, had a significant problem. Boxing requires space. It requires the ability to retreat, to circle, and to use the length of the arm to maintain distance. In a prison hallway, a shower stall, or a crowded mess hall, that space simply does not exist. If a fight breaks out, it is immediate, it is close quarters, and it almost always involves an ambush. This necessity for hyper-close-range defense led to the evolution of what would become known as Jailhouse Rock, or JHR. The name itself is a bit of a linguistic puzzle. Some say it refers to the literal rocking motion of the body used to absorb impact, while others point to the rhythmic, almost musical quality of the defensive movements. But the most common name, 52 blocks, carries a heavier weight of mystery. Some practitioners claim there are literally 52 distinct defensive maneuvers, each numbered and categorized. Others suggest the name comes from the game of cards, the 52 pickup metaphor for the chaos of a fight, or perhaps the idea that a master of the system has a card for every possible hand an opponent could play. There are even more esoteric theories connecting the number to the supreme mathematics of the 5% nation, a movement that had a profound influence on urban culture and prison life during the era when the style was most prominent. Regardless of the origin of the name, the philosophy of the system is clear. The best offense is an impenetrable defense that punishes the attacker for even trying. The technical core of 52 blocks is built around the concept of the cage. Unlike a standard boxing guard, where the hands are held high to protect the chin, but the forearms are often vertical, the 52 practitioner uses a horizontal and diagonal layering of the arms. It is a system of elbow blocks and V-guards. Imagine a fighter pulling their lead arm across their face, the elbow pointing directly at the opponent, while the trailing hand reinforces the structure. This creates a literal wall of bone. In a street or prison fight, people tend to swing wide, heavy haymakers or frantic straight flurries. The 52 practitioner doesn't just block these shots, they spike them. By positioning the sharp point of the elbow in the path of an incoming fist, the defender turns the attacker's own momentum against them. A man who throws a full-power punch only to have his knuckles collide with the point of an elbow is often finished right then and there, his hand shattered before he can even register what happened. This is why 52 is often described as a bone-breaking art. It is a passive-aggressive form of violence where the defender remains a fortress and the attacker essentially beats themselves to death against the walls. This emphasis on the elbow isn't just about damage, it's about the reality of fighting without gloves. In professional sports, your hands are protected by layers of foam and tape. In a real-world confrontation, the small bones of the hand are incredibly fragile. Punching someone in the forehead or the elbow is a fast way to end up in the emergency room with a boxer's fracture. 52 Blocks recognizes this reality and prioritizes the use of the elbows, the forearms, and the palms, the hard parts of the body, to protect the soft parts and dismantle the opponent's weapons. Beyond the physical mechanics, there is a deep cultural and psychological layer to the art. For a long time, 52 Blocks was considered a folk martial art. It wasn't taught in dojos with white belts and certificates. It was passed down through a process of observation and restricted transmission. A younger inmate might watch an older, seasoned veteran practicing a series of strange, fluid movements in the corner of the yard, movements that looked like a mix of shadowboxing and a rhythmic, jerky dance. This dance served a dual purpose. First, it allowed the practitioner to hide their training in plain sight. To a prison guard watching from a distance, the inmate appeared to be just exercising or styling rather than practicing a lethal combat system. This element of deception is a recurring theme in African American martial traditions, drawing parallels to the way capoeira was disguised as a dance by enslaved people in Brazil. Second, the rhythm of the movements helped the fighter internalize the flow of a fight. In 52, you are rarely static. Your arms are constantly moving in a series of blocks that flow into one another, creating a kinetic shield that is difficult for an opponent to timing. It's about creating a cluttered visual field for the attacker. When you're faced with a practitioner of 52, you don't see a clear target. You see a shifting lattice of elbows and forearms, and every opening you think you see is actually a trap designed to lead your fist directly onto a hard point of bone. This psychological pressure is just as important as the physical defense. It makes the attacker hesitate, and in a high-stakes fight, hesitation is usually fatal. As the style began to leak out of the prison system and into the urban landscape of New York City, it started to influence and be influenced by the burgeoning culture of hip-hop and the street life of the 70s and 80s. You can see the echoes of 52 Blocks in the early days of breakdancing, specifically in the top rock and the intricate arm movements known as threading. It became a point of pride in certain neighborhoods, a secret heritage that distinguished the streetwise fighter from the gym-trained boxer. Legends began to grow around certain practitioners, men like Mother Hubbard, who is often cited as one of the great masters and progenitors of the style. These figures weren't just fighters, they were keepers of an oral tradition. They taught that 52 wasn't just about hitting and not getting hit. It was about the science of the body. They spoke of the skull and crossbones, a specific defensive posture that protected the vitals while keeping the elbows ready to strike like the fangs of a cobra. They talked about the gun gallery, a metaphor for the way a fighter should envision their environment and the incoming threats. This transition from the prison yard to the street marked a turning point for the art. It began to lose some of its absolute secrecy, but in doing so, it gained a new level of scrutiny. Martial artists from other disciplines, karate, kung fu, and eventually Brazilian jiu-jitsu, started to take notice. Some dismissed it as nothing more than unrefined brawling or a collection of flashy tricks with no real substance. Others, however, saw something deeper, a highly specialized indigenous American combat system that had solved the problems of close-quarter survival in a way that no traditional Eastern art ever had. They saw a style that was perfectly adapted to the most violent environments imaginable, and they began to wonder what else this invisible art had to teach the world of combat sports. The deeper you look into the technical architecture of 52 Blocks, the more you realize that it isn't just a collection of lucky punches or street-tested reflexes. It is a system that views the human body as a series of angles and levers, often referred by practitioners as the science of the game. This terminology isn't accidental. Much of the development of 52 in the mid-20th century was deeply intertwined with the teachings of the 5% nation, also known as the nation of gods and earths. In this cultural context, science refers to the application of logic, mathematics, and supreme wisdom to everyday life. For an inmate in the New York system, applying science to a fight meant moving away from the emotional, frantic swinging of an amateur and toward a cold, calculated efficiency. They began to see the guard not as a static pose, but as a shifting equation. If an opponent throws a punch at angle A, the practitioner responds with block B, which automatically sets up counterstrike C. This mathematical approach to violence is what allowed the style to survive in an environment where the margin for error was zero. When you hear a practitioner talk about doing the math in a fight, they are referring to this instantaneous process of reading an opponent's kinetic energy and canceling it out with a superior geometric structure. One of the most fascinating aspects of this science is how it redefines the concept of the block itself. In traditional boxing, a block is often a passive act. You absorb the blow so your chin doesn't have to. In 52 blocks, every defensive movement is simultaneously an attack. This is the principle of the attacking block. When a fighter uses the skull and crossbones, a signature move where the arms are crossed in front of the face with the elbows flared out, they aren't just hiding. They are creating a spiked wall. If the opponent strikes that wall, they break their hand. If the opponent tries to clinch, those flared elbows become daggers that gouge into the ribs or the neck. Another core maneuver, often called the door, involves a swinging motion of the forearm that parries a punch while the elbow continues through the arc to strike the opponent's jaw or temple. There is no wasted motion. Every time you move to protect yourself, you are also moving to end the fight. This economy of movement is essential because in a prison setting, you rarely have the luxury of a long, drawn-out battle. A fight needs to be over in seconds before the man in the bubble, the corrections officer, can intervene, or before the opponent's friends can join in. This brings us to the controversial and often debated African roots of the system. Some historians and practitioners, most notably Douglas Senac, have argued that 52 blocks is a direct descendant of ancestral African combat arts like Dambe from Nigeria or Musangwe from South Africa. The theory suggests that while the transatlantic slave trade attempted to strip captive people of their culture, the kinetic DNA of these warrior traditions survived in the form of knocking and kicking games found on plantations in the American South. Over generations, these movements were said to have morphed and adapted, eventually finding a home in the urban North and, ultimately, the prison system. While this theory is difficult to prove with hard archaeological evidence, the visual similarities are striking. The upright posture, the rhythmic pumping of the arms, and the heavy use of the elbows in 52 mirror techniques found in many West African wrestling and boxing styles. Whether it is a direct lineage or a case of convergent evolution, where similar environments produce similar solutions, the result is a style that feels distinctly different from the Greco-Roman or Asian martial arts that dominate the mainstream. It is a diasporic art, a survival mechanism encoded into the movement of a people who had to learn to fight in shadows and small spaces. As we move into the 80s and 90s, the style began to take on different regional flavors. The 52 practiced in Rikers Island in New York wasn't exactly the same as the Jailhouse seen in the Lorton Reformatory in Virginia or the institutions in Maryland. Some lineages emphasized the blocks more heavily, creating an almost impenetrable defensive shell, while others integrated more fluid, dirty boxing techniques, including headbutts, thumbing the eyes, and lacing, the act of rubbing the rough laces of a boxing glove or a makeshift wrap across an opponent's face to cause cuts and distraction. This regional variation added to the mystique and the difficulty of pinning down a standard version of the art. It also led to a significant amount of gatekeeping. For a long time, if you hadn't done time or grown up in specific neighborhoods in the Bronx or Brooklyn, you simply weren't allowed to see the real thing. It was a secret society of the fist. You had to be vetted. You had to prove you were righteous or that you had the sand to handle the training. This secrecy was a double-edged sword. It preserved the purity and the street edge of the art, but it also meant that as the older generation of masters began to age out or pass away, the system was at risk of being lost to history. The transition of 52 blocks from a hidden prison secret to a public phenomenon began in earnest in the late 90s and early 2000s, largely thanks to the rise of the internet and the work of individuals like Light Burley and the constellation of the 52. Suddenly, videos began to surface on early file-sharing sites and later on YouTube, showing men in parks or small gyms performing these high-speed, intricate arm movements. The reaction from the broader martial arts community was one of intense skepticism. To the average karate black belt or Muay Thai practitioner, it looked like slapboxing or a choreographed dance. They didn't see the spikes. They didn't see the math. They saw what looked like a lack of traditional form. This led to a period of challenge matches and intense online vitriol. Critics claimed that 52 blocks was a modern invention, a mall martial art, dressed up in street clothes to look cool. However, those who took the time to look closer, including some professional boxers and MMA trainers, started to see the functional brilliance hidden beneath the styling. They noticed how the 52 blocker's head was always protected, even when they seemed to be showboating. They saw how the rhythmic movements served to mask the telegraph, the subtle physical cues that a fighter gives off before they strike. In a traditional boxing stance, your intentions are often written in your shoulders and your eyes. In 52, the constant fluid motion of the arms acts as a form of visual noise. The opponent's brain gets overwhelmed by the moving parts, making it almost impossible to tell when a block is turning into a strike. This is often called the blur. If you can't track the hands, you can't defend the hit. This realization led to a quiet integration of 52 principles into high-level combat sports. You can see flashes of it in the defensive shell of certain world-class boxers who use their elbows to deflect body shots and their forearms to frame against an opponent's face in the clinch. They might not call it 52 blocks, and they might never have stepped foot in a prison, but the science is the same. It is the universal logic of the close-quarters fight. Another critical element of the 52 blocks science is the concept of the broken rhythm. Most traditional martial arts emphasize a steady, predictable cadence. You strike on the beat. 52 intentionally breaks that beat. The movements are syncopated, much like the jazz and hip-hop music that grew alongside the art. A practitioner might move slowly for 3 beats, then explode with a flurry of 4 movements in the space of 1 beat, then suddenly freeze. This stop-start kinetic energy is incredibly taxing for an opponent to deal with. It forces them to constantly reset their internal clock, leading to mental fatigue and physical hesitation. When combined with the V-guard and the triangle, this broken rhythm turns the fighter into a chaotic puzzle. You aren't just fighting a man, you are fighting a system designed to frustrate your senses and punish your every instinct. This is why 52 is often described as an asymmetric style. It doesn't want to trade punches with you. It wants to break your rhythm, break your hands, and then break your spirit, all while remaining virtually untouched behind a wall of bone and movement. It is the ultimate expression of the low-resource warrior, the person who has nothing but their body and their wits, and turns those limited tools into a masterclass in survival. As the art continues to evolve in the modern era, moving from the yard to the cage and the street, it carries with it the scars and the wisdom of its origin. It remains a testament to the fact that wherever humans are pushed to their absolute limit, they will find a way to turn that pressure into something powerful, something technical, and something undeniably lethal. Now, we must look at how 52 blocks survives today and whether it can truly hold its own in the brutal, hyper-transparent world of modern combat sports. For years, the art lived in a state of Schrodinger's cat. It was both a lethal secret and a potential myth, depending on who you asked. But as the 21st century progressed, the invisible art began to manifest in the most visible arena on Earth, the octagon. When we watch elite fighters move, we often see shadows of the yard without even realizing it. Think about the way certain fighters use their forearms to frame and control an opponent's head in the clinch, or how they use a high elbow cover to deflect a hook while simultaneously landing a counter. This is the DNA of 52 blocks. While many of these athletes might have learned these moves through traditional Muay Thai or boxing, the specific clustering of the defense, the way the arms form a geometric lattice, is pure JHR. Some fighters, like the legendary Zab Judah, have been more explicit about their connection to the style. Judah, a Brooklyn native, often showcased hand speed and defensive patterns that looked less like standard Queensberry rules and more like the frantic, rhythmic styling seen in the parks of New York. In his movements, you could see the lacing, the shuffling, and that peculiar jerky rhythm that makes an opponent feel like they are trying to hit a ghost made of razors. The transition from the street to the professional gym required a translation of sorts. In the prison yard, the goal is often to maim or discourage an attacker as quickly as possible, usually in an environment where weapons might be involved. In the ring, you have a referee, a timer, and rules. This change in environment led to the sportification of some 52 techniques. Trainers began to realize that the V-guard and the skull and crossbones were incredibly effective against the 4-ounce gloves used in MMA. Because these gloves are so small, they don't provide the same shield that a 10-ounce boxing glove does. You can't just hide behind your hands in MMA. The punches find the gaps. 52 blocks solves this by using the entire forearm and the point of the elbow as the primary defensive surface. It doesn't matter how small the gloves are if you are hitting a wall of bone. This has led to a resurgence of interest among tactical instructors and reality-based self-defense experts. They see 52 not as a sport, but as a combat survival system that fills the holes left by traditional boxing. They teach the 7 primary blocks as a foundational kit for anyone who might find themselves in a bad breath distance confrontation, the kind of fight that happens in an elevator, a doorway, or a crowded bar. But we cannot talk about the modern era without addressing the mystery of the 52. Is there really a list of 52 distinct moves? If you talk to 10 different OGs from the New York system, you might get 10 different answers. Some say the number is symbolic, representing the weeks in a year or the cards in a deck. Others, however, insist on a rigid curriculum. They speak of moves with names like the sleeping man, the door, the window, the cradle, and the butcher. These names aren't just for show, they are mnemonic devices that describe the physical shape and the spirit of the movement. The sleeping man, for instance, looks like someone resting their head on their hand, but it's actually a deceptive guard that hides a devastating elbow spike. The cradle involves a rhythmic rocking of the torso that generates power for short-range hooks while keeping the chin tucked behind the shoulder. This hidden in plain sight nomenclature is part of the art's charm and its defense mechanism. It's a language that only those in the life can fully translate. This level of complexity suggests that 52 isn't just a collection of tricks. It's a deep cognitive system that requires years of shadowing and freestyling to master. The training methodology itself is a fascinating study in adaptation. Without access to heavy bags, speed bags, or high-tech equipment, the practitioners of the yard had to innovate. They used the wall as a partner, practicing their blocks and spikes against the concrete to harden the bones and perfect the angles. They used the mirror as their primary instructor, obsessively refining their flow until their movements were fluid and instinctual. This led to a unique aesthetic. The 52 blocker often looks like they are dancing with their own shadow. This shadow dancing serves a physiological purpose, building the fast twitch muscle fibers and the muscle memory needed to react to an ambush in a split second. It's a form of moving meditation, a way for an incarcerated man to reclaim his body and his agency in a system designed to strip him of both. When you see a master of the art today, like Big K or Light Burley, there is a certain swag to their movement. It's not just about fighting, it's about a specific kind of urban cool, a defiant rhythmic expression of strength. The legacy of 52 blocks also extends into the world of cinema and pop culture, often without being explicitly named. When you see the intricate, close-quarters hand-fighting in modern action movies like John Wick or the Bourne series, you are seeing a style of combat that owes a massive debt to the principles of JHR. These films prioritize the blocking as attacking philosophy and the use of the elbows as primary weapons. Even in the world of comic books and superheroes, The urban brawler archetype is often depicted using the crossed arm guards and the tight, defensive shells characteristic of the 52. It has become the visual shorthand for the guy who knows how to survive on the streets. This cultural penetration is a testament to the art's effectiveness and its visual power. It looks real because it was forged in the most real environments imaginable. It doesn't have the theatricality of some traditional Eastern arts, nor the clinical feel of some modern sports. It has a raw, jagged edge that resonates with our primal understanding of conflict. However, the question remains, is 52 blocks better than traditional martial arts? The honest answer is that it is different. It is a specialized tool for a specialized environment. If you put a 52 practitioner in a professional boxing ring with a world-class athlete, the boxer's superior footwork and specialized punch volume might prevail. But if you put that same boxer in a 4x4 cell with a 52 master, the outcome might be very different. 52 is the king of the tight space. It is the ultimate answer to the ambush. It is a system designed for the non-consensual fight, the one you didn't see coming and the one you can't run away from. In that context, its science is peerless. It reminds us that combat isn't a one-size-fits-all endeavor. Different environments demand different evolutions. The prison yard is a unique ecosystem, and 52 blocks is the apex predator of that ecosystem. As we look to the future, the challenge for 52 blocks will be to maintain its soul while integrating into the global martial arts community. There is a fear among some of the old guard that by going public, the art will become diluted. They worry that the secret will be sold off in 3-minute YouTube tutorials and that the righteousness of the training will be lost. Yet, there is also a sense of pride. For decades, this was an invisible art, a secret heritage of the American urban experience. Now, it is finally being recognized as a legitimate, sophisticated, and technically brilliant combat system. It is a bridge between the ancestral past and the gritty present, a kinetic history book written in the movement of the arms and the hardness of the elbows. It proves that even in the darkest, most restrictive places, the human spirit will find a way to create something beautiful, something complex, and something undeniably powerful. So, the next time you see a fighter move with a strange, syncopated rhythm, their arms weaving a complex web of bone and motion, don't just dismiss it as styling. You might be witnessing the science of the yard. You might be seeing the math of the 52. You are looking at a system that was born in the shadows, raised in the crucible of the prison system, and refined in the toughest neighborhoods in America. It is a reminder that in the world of fighting, the most dangerous weapon isn't the one you can see. It's the one that's been hidden for 50 years, waiting for the right moment to strike. From the skull and crossbones to the gun gallery, 52 blocks remains a masterclass in the art of not being hit, and the science of making sure your opponent regrets the attempt. It is the secret language of the fist, spoken by those who have nothing left to lose and everything to protect. It is 52 blocks, the invisible art of the American yard, finally stepping into the light. And as the world of combat sports continues to evolve, you can bet that the lessons learned in the narrow hallways of Rikers and the concrete yards of Attica will continue to shape the way we think about survival, defense, and the true nature of the fight. This isn't just a martial art. This is the grit of the city, the rhythm of the street, and the unwavering will to survive turned into a science. It is the 52. It is the rock, and it isn't going anywhere. In the end, 52 blocks tells us something profound about human nature. It tells us that we are problem solvers. When faced with a wall, we learn to climb it. When faced with a cage, we learn to turn that cage into a fortress. The blocks aren't just for defense. They are a metaphor for resilience. Every time a practitioner crosses their arms in the skull and crossbones, they are making a statement. They are saying, "You cannot break me. You cannot touch me. Your violence will only hurt you." That is the ultimate science. That is the ultimate math. And that is why 52 blocks will always be more than just a street fighting style. It is a testament to the ingenuity of the human spirit in the face of adversity. It is a legacy carved in bone and tempered in the fire of the yard. Whether it's practiced in a luxury gym in Manhattan or a dusty park in Brooklyn, the spirit remains the same. It's about the flow, the rhythm, and the absolute refusal to be a victim. It's the 52. Study the math, respect the science, and never underestimate the man who knows how to move in the shadows.